Agonizing human screams echoed within the slimy confines of the Saran torture pit, soon to morph into alien shrieks of suffering. Captain Jim Moss Wilson of the Human Special Forces hung from chains in a putrid cell, stripped bare and battered by Soran guards. Enduring beatings and truth serums, Moss clenched his teeth, knowing his capture and interrogation were inevitable after staying behind to cover his team's escape from a sabotaged Soran weapons depot. KAC, frustrated, slammed his fist on the control panel, finding Moss unlike any prisoner he had faced before. The truth serums failed to yield results, and beatings only provoked defiant grunts and spitting of blood. "You're trying my patience, Earther?" KX growled, determined to extract the desired information one way or another. Moss, defiant, glared back, enduring the electric shocks and water submersion inflicted upon him. Despite the agony, he refused to yield, challenging KX's assertion of Soran's superiority. Impatient, Krulak decided to extract the information directly from Moss's mind, employing a spherical contraption with blinking lights and protruding wires. With electrodes attached to Moss's skull, KX offered one last chance to avoid the impending agony, but Moss spat defiance once more. As KX activated the device, ominous energy hummed to life, signaling the escalation of the interrogation. The human threw his head back and let out a primal howl, muscles straining against his shackles. Every nerve in his body felt as if it were being flayed raw, white-hot pain searing through his skull as the machine attempted to invade his mind. Despite the onslaught, the human fought back, gritting his teeth and resisting the mind probe with all his strength. Memories flashed through his head, his training, his comrades, his sheer iron while acting as a mental bulwark against the invasive device. KRX watched in disbelief as the human defied the mind probe. It should have been impossible. This Earther's fortitude was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Eager to discover more about this species, KRX resolved to break the human, no matter the cost. This defiance was admirable but ultimately futile. KRX would extract the secrets from his brain, shattering his will in the process. Days blurred into weeks as Moss hung in chains, subjected to KRX's cruel interrogations. Electric shocks, waterboarding, and mind probes were just a few of the torments inflicted upon him. Despite the agony, Moss retreated deep into his mind, focusing on his training and the billions of lives depending on him. He would not betray his people even if it meant facing death. Frustrated, KRX entered the cell, accompanied by another Soran named Zarek. The interrogator threatened to flay Zarek alive unless Moss yielded. Seeing the terror in Zarek's eyes, something inside Moss snapped. A life in exchange for information was not something he could accept. Unacceptable, Moss spat. "You think I'll let you torture a kid just to get me to talk? I'll die before I let that happen." KRX paused, caught off guard by the response. Seizing his chance, Moss roared, wrenching against his weakened chains until they snapped like twigs. KRX stumbled back in shock as Moss lunged at him, slamming his fist into KX's throat, crushing his larynx. The Soran gurgled, blood spewing from his mouth, as Moss followed up with a knee to the abdomen, finishing with a precise strike to a nerve cluster, sending KX crumpling to the ground. It was over in seconds. Moss stood over the interrogator's twitching body, breathing hard. Turning to Zarek, who stared at him in awe, Moss said, "Come on, kid. Let's get out of here." Zarek scrambled to his feet, amazed. You saved me. After everything we did to you, why?" Moss met his gaze. "Because it was the right thing to do. I don't care what species you are. I won't let an innocent suffer, not on my watch." Zarek nodded slowly. "I'll help you escape. This is wrong. You've shown me that. Whatever you need, I'm with you." A grin split Moss's battered face. "Looks like this is the start of a beautiful friendship, kid. Now let's move. We've got a planet to save." Moss and Zarek crept through the slimy corridors of the Soran facility, with Moss leaning on his newfound ally for support. Weeks of torture had taken their toll, but adrenaline and sheer determination kept Moss moving. Zarek guided them through twisting passages, avoiding patrols with his insider knowledge. As they turned a corner, Moss froze. Through a transparent membrane, he glimpsed a group of humans huddled together in a cramped cell. Recognizing them as fellow soldiers captured in previous battles, Moss whispered urgently to Zarek, "We have to free them." Zarek hesitated, warning of the risks, but Moss's resolve was unwavering. "I'm not leaving them behind. They'd do the same for me." With Zarek's agreement, they quickly sprung into action, freeing the imprisoned soldiers. With Zarek leading the way, they crept down the hallway, a ragtag band of survivors. Hearing voices drawing closer, Moss tensed, and with a primal roar, he charged at the approaching guards, barely giving them time to react before they were overwhelmed. He wielded his improvised blade with ferocity, slashing through tough hide, while his other hand found a guard's throat, crushing the delicate gills. Moss moved like a whirlwind, a lifetime of training and weeks of pent-up rage fueling his assault. The other humans surged forward, overpowering the remaining guards through sheer numbers and desperation. They stripped the corpses of weapons, arming themselves with Soran plasma rifles and vibro blades. The alarms blared through the complex, a wailing klaxon that set Moss's teeth on edge. Their escape had been discovered. Stealth was no longer an option. Speed was their only chance now. To the hangar! Zarek yelled over the alarms. It's our best shot this way. They raced through the fleshy halls, Soran and ire splashing underfoot, guards boiling out to meet them, plasma fire filling the air. Moss returned fire, his appropriated rifle spitting searing bolts of energy. His fellow soldiers fanned out, laying down suppressing fire as they pushed forward. Dodging plasma bolts, Moss snapped off a shot, catching a Soran between its bulbous eyes, the alien toppling, ire splattering the walls. After what felt like an eternity of running and gunning, they burst into the cavernous hangar bay. A handful of shuttles squatted on the deck, their curves glistening with condensation. Moss sprinted for the nearest one, his team close on his heels. Zarek slapped the control panel, and the hatch dilated open with a wet squelch. They piled inside, Moss hammering the hatch closed behind them as plasma bolts pinged off the shuttle's hull. Sliding into the pilot's seat, Moss grappled with the strange, pulsing controls. "Hang on!" he shouted, slamming his palm onto the launch button. The shuttle lurched, alien engines howling, G-forces crushing him back into the seat as the small craft hurtled out of the hangar and into open space. Glancing back at his bedraggled crew, Moss managed a tight smile. "We all did it," he said, meeting Zarek's gaze. "And you're one of us now, kid. No going back." Zarek looked out at the stars streaking past, his expression unreadable. "I know my place is with you now, with the turn, my people. We've been wrong about so much. It's time for a change." Moss clasped the young Soran's shoulder. "Damn right it is. And you're going to help us bring that change together." Turning back to the console, Moss plotted a course for the nearest Earth outpost. They had a long fight ahead of them against an implacable foe, but with Zarek's knowledge of Soran tactics and Moss's indomitable human spirit, they just might stand a chance. It was time to take the war to the enemy, to show the Saurians what humanity was truly made of. The stolen Soran shuttle shuddered as it punched through the upper atmosphere, the hull glowing cherry red from the friction. Moss gripped the organic controls, his knuckles white as he fought to keep the craft steady. The other humans clung to their seats, battered but determined, their eyes fixed on the view screen. Suddenly, the skies ahead filled with a dizzying array of ships and explosions. Moss squinted, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. Those were Earth ships out there, their familiar angular shapes a stark contrast to the bulbous Soran craft, and they were giving the aliens hell. "Holy," one of the escaped prisoners breathed. "Is that reinforcements?" Zarek leaned forward, his eyes widening. "An Earth battle fleet. They must have received your distress signal." Memories flooded back to Moss. Their frantic escape, the desperate transmission sent out before his capture. Against all odds, the message had gotten through. Plasma beams and missiles crisscrossed the void. Earth and Soran ships engaged in a deadly dance of destruction. Moss keyed the comms, praying the Earth ships would recognize the signal. "This is Captain Jim Wilson of the Earth Special Forces. I'm in a commandeered Soran shuttle with human prisoners aboard, requesting immediate assistance." For a heart-stopping moment, there was nothing but static. Then a voice crackled through the speakers, tight with barely restrained emotion. "Captain Wilson, you magnificent bastard. I knew you were too stubborn to die. This is Admiral Prescott of the ESS Indomitable. We'll cover you. Head for the flagship." Moss nearly wept with relief. They were going to make it. Against all odds, they were actually going to make it. He glanced at Zarek, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "You ready to stick it to your former buddies, kid?" The young Soran matched his predatory smile. "Let's make them regret the day they ever heard the name human." Moss gunned the engines, the shuttle surging forward as Earth fighters fell in around them, escorting them through the chaos ahead. The massive bulk of the Indomitable loomed, its guns blazing as it traded fire with a Soran dreadnought. I've got intel on the Soran command post. Moss shouted into the comms. High-value targets, troop deployments, the works. I can guide you right to their nerve center. Music to my ears, Captain, Admiral Prescott replied grimly. Transmit that data, and we'll light them up like the 4th of July. It's time we finished this fight on our terms. Moss's fingers flew over the console, Zarek assisting with his insider knowledge of Soran systems. Together, they uploaded everything they knew about the enemy stronghold. On the view screen, they watched as the Earth fleet repositioned, focusing their fire on the key targets Moss had identified. The Soran ships reeled under the onslaught, their formation crumbling as explosions chained across the alien command post. Cheers erupted in the shuttle's cramped confines as the humans witnessed the tide of battle turning before their eyes. Moss slumped back in his chair, exhaustion and relief warring within him. They had done it. The intel he had provided was leading the Earth forces to victory. As the last Soran capital ship burst into flames, Admiral Prescott's voice filled the comms once more, thick with emotion. Captain Wilson, you crazy heroic son of a... Admiral Prescott exclaimed. I don't know how you did it, but you just turned the tide of this whole damn war. The sands are in full retreat. We've won. Moss looked around at his ragtag band, the prisoners he'd freed, the young Soran who had turned his back on his own kind to do what was right. Pride swelled in his chest. We all did it, Admiral. Every last one of us. And we couldn't have done it without Zarek here. He's one of us now. There was a pause. Then Admiral Prescott spoke again, his voice warm. Any friend of Jim Wilson is a friend of Earth. Bring your new recruit on board, Captain. It's time we welcomed our heroes home. As the shuttle slid into the Indomitable's hangar bay, Moss felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The nightmare was over. He was going home, back to an Earth made safer by their sacrifice and courage. Glancing at Zarek, he saw the same mix of exhaustion and elation in the young Soran's eyes. You ready for this, kid? It's going to be one hell of a debriefing. Zarek straightened his shoulders, a fierce light in his gaze. I'm ready. My people need to know the truth about the humans, about the strength and honor I've seen in you. It's time for a new beginning between our kinds. Moss clasped his arm in a warrior's salute. Couldn't have said it better myself. Now let's get out there and face the music together. The hatch hissed open, and together, the human and the Soran stepped out into the bright lights of the hangar bay, ready to face a future they'd forged through blood, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond of brotherhood.